Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1204B, and today's date is February 14th, 2017, and the title of the episode is The Deep State Soft Coup is Now in Progress to Take Full Control of the Country. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, in past reports, we talked about how the government officials, they work under a different set of laws than the people of this country. And here are some of the things that, well, people can't really do, but the government can and does. So, spend more money than we earn. Well, the government, they're spending a lot more than they're actually earning. Usually when people do this, they go bankrupt, but we can see the government is continually doing this. The other thing they can do is debase the currency. They can seize private property without due process or just compensation. Bear full function arms for defense of life, liberty, and property. Support foreign governments and rebellions we approve of with arms and money. Murder innocent civilians. Trade on insider information. Yes, Congress exempted most federal workers from this. And we have to go back in time during Obama, during his administration, that it turns out that Congress, well, they eliminated a key requirement of the insider trading law for most of federal employees, passing legislation exempting these workers. They were also exempted from Obamacare. The staffers were exempted from receiving Obamacare. And when we look at all of this, we can see that they're playing under a completely different set of rules compared to the people. Now, this is an excerpt from They Thought They Were Free, the Germans from 1933 to 1945 by Milton Mayer. This separation of government from people, this widening of the gap, took place so gradually and so insensibly, each step disguised, perhaps not even intentionally, as a temporary emergency measure or associated with a true patriotic allegiance or with the real social purposes. And all the crisis and reforms so occupied the people, they did not see the slow motion underneath of the whole process of government growing remoter and remoter. And this is what we've been seeing here in the United States. Now, Representative Jim Jordan says Obamacare repeal should be on Trump's desk in 6 to 8 weeks, and then a replacement will follow. We will see if this really gets this far, because so far at this point, all he's done is he's signed an executive order. Now, Moby is out there, and he's making a couple predictions here, and he wants to put this on record, so when all this comes true, he has it, out there so people realize what's going on. But it looks like he's a little late to the show here, and a lot of the stuff he says is completely fake, phony, and false. One, he's saying that the Russian dossier on Trump is completely true. It's 100% real. Well, right now, he provided no proof, and this whole dossier was debunked. Remember going back in time when 4chan, an anonymous individual, created this, then passed it along. John McCain picked it up, handed it over to the CIA, believing that this was completely true when it was completely made up. Another part of this entire thing was that we know that was completely fake is that the 35-page dossier was written and created by the British, and they used the word classified, but they used the word official. And we already know that a Republican, an unknown Republican, a Democrat, paid for the anti-Trump report. So we know that this is completely fake, phony, and false. He also said, number two, the Trump administration is in collusion with the Russian government and has been since day one. So far, there's no proof of this. The server story that Trump is communicating with Russia, that was debunked. It wasn't really Trump's server that he actually used. It was plagued with malware, sending spam out to many different servers, not just Russian servers. Number three, the Trump administration needs a war, most likely with Iran. Well, we know this is completely fake, phony, and false, It's not the Trump administration that needs the war. It is the central bank, the elite, that need the war. And if we look back in time, we can see that they've been preparing for this war. They've been provoking Iran, not just Iran, but Russia, as we've been looking at. We've been seeing North Korea. We've been seeing China. And if we look back in time, we see back in January of 2014, the White House suggests Iran sanctions. This bill could draw U.S. into a war during that period. We see a top Iranian military official warns Kerry against attacking Iran's nuclear facility. This was back in January of 2014. The White House draws red line on Iranian ballistic missile, February of 2014. And we know that the central bankers want a war with Iran because they're dumping the dollar. The whole point of the P5+1 deal was to make sure that Iran never became a nuclear weaponized country, and they wanted them to use the US dollar when they sold their oil. But we can see that Iran decided that they weren't going to use the dollar. They were going to use the euro for their oil sales. This was February of 2016. Nothing to do with Trump. Then there was some type of mission where there were Navy boats that were in Iranian waters, and the Iranian captured 2 U.S. Navy boats, and they were holding them for a certain period of time because it looks like they were trying to sneak in and maybe do something. Then, just recently, in February, Iran said, we're going to ditch the dollar altogether. Now, of course, they said this is because of Trump's travel ban, but that makes no sense because they didn't mind when the U.S. government central bankers went into every single country in the Middle East. They didn't mind that they were in Syria trying to remove Assad, where Iran has been fighting them since 2011. But if Trump creates this travel ban, that's the last straw? I mean, seriously. So he's a little late to the show. This has been in motion for a very long time. He says there are right-wing plans to get rid of Trump. Well, there's right-wing, there's left-wing. The central bank wants him gone. The deep state wants him gone. He's not part of any type of system. They're going to try to get rid of him. They're going to try to stop whatever he's trying to do. So we can see that Moby is out there. He's trying to make a case. He's trying to put all these predictions down. But he's not looking in the past of what has been happening. He's not seeing everything that we've been looking at, what we've been reporting on. Now, Judicial Watch is out there, and they obtained 216 pages of documents containing official emails of former Department of Homeland Security Jeh Johnson and 3 other DHS officials, and they were using, yes, private, unsecured email accounts. The documents include sensitive emails talking about high-level meetings, which Johnson had planned with Kuwaiti ambassador and officials from Saudi Arabia. And among the information revealed in the emails released by Johnson gave a progress report, a speech in which he cited how the Department of Homeland Security is working so hard in cybersecurity, and he's using an unsecured private email system. And we can see right now that it is ironic that Secretary Johnson and his aides touted Homeland Security's great strides in cybersecurity while using unsecured private web-based email accounts that the department had officially prohibited. So the only reason you're using a private email system, secured or unsecured makes no difference, is that you don't want anyone to see the emails on the government email system, or you want other individuals to gain access to these emails because it's unsecured. Instead of dropping the information at a Dropbox, putting a X on a bench, it's much easier to leave it completely unsecured so anybody can come in and take and look around at what they want. And they can say, well, it's not my fault. And this way they try to use this as an excuse like Hillary Clinton. Now, today we can see that Flynn, General Flynn, he resigned. And we see at this point the corporate media, the elite, the central bankers, they are trying to chip away at the Trump administration. And they're pointing out every little thing that they do. And they're looking at it and broadcasting it. Because when we look at other administrations, a lot of the administrations have done the same thing. Now, General Flynn, he was communicating with Russia during the period where they were transitioning and Trump wasn't really sworn in just yet. And of course, yes, under the Logan Act, 18 U.S. Code 953, states any citizen of the United States, wherever he may be, who, without authority of the United States, directly or indirectly commences or carries on any correspondence or intercourse with any foreign government or any officer or agent thereof with intent to influence the measures or conduct of any foreign government or of any officer or agent thereof in relation to any disputes or controversies with the United States, or to defeat the measures of the United States, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years or both. Now, no one has ever been imprisoned under the Logan Act. But throughout other administrations have dealt with other countries before the administration has been sworn in. The difference here is the corporate media, they are pointing at every little thing and saying, look what just happened here. Now, Flynn, he shouldn't have lied about talking to Russia and things like that. He did resign. And what we're seeing right now is that there's a soft coup going on. And a soft coup is a coordinated effort to delegitimize or undermine a lawfully elected official. And this is what we're seeing right now. And Paul Craig Roberts is out there, and he warned less than a month ago that a color revolution was taking place in the U.S. He said, my first element of proof was the so-called investigation which the CIA, FBI, NSA, and others were conducting against Trump's candidate to become National Security Advisor, General Flynn. Well, he said the plot to get rid of Flynn has succeeded. And he offered his resignation, which Trump accepted. And he said that Flynn dared the unthinkable. He dared to declare that the bloated U.S. intelligence community had to be reformed. Flynn also tried to subordinate the CIA and Joint Chiefs to the president via the National Security Council. Flynn tried to wrestle the ultimate power and authority from the CIA and the Pentagon, and it didn't work out. Because Flynn understood that Russia was no threat to the U.S. or to Europe. For one thing, the Washington swamp will not be drained right now. If anything, the swamp has triumphed and it will be filled. So Trump's idea of draining the swamp is not going to happen. And Paul Craig Roberts says he sees very dark clouds on the horizon right now. And Putin, Lavrov, they understand what's happening at this point. Now we see that Nancy Pelosi and many others are out there, and they're calling out for a full investigation into Trump's ties to the Kremlin. Because now they're looking at this and they're trying to make ties to that Trump is working with Putin, and they're doing this behind the back, and they're blowing this completely out of proportion. And what they're doing is they're slowly chipping away at Trump right now. Even the intelligence operatives, they're withholding sensitive information from the White House. They've never done this before. This is the first time in history, because they believe that Russia will find out anything they tell the president. So you can see right now the intelligence agencies, the Obama leftovers, the deep state, those behind the curtain, the central bank, they're all working against Trump right now. They want him to fall in line, or they're going to get rid of him one way or another. And actually, they're racing against time at this point, because when we look at the economy, we know that it's falling apart. Now, we need to think Trump has only been in office for a couple of weeks. If he can bring down the economy sooner than later, the economy collapsing will be blamed on Obama and the central bank. If he cannot bring the economy down in the near future, I'm talking about the next couple of months, and it goes longer and longer and longer to maybe the end of this year, the third quarter of this year, they will be able to make the case, the central bank, the deep state, that Trump, he was the cause. And if they can pull this off, the Trump administration is completely done. So Trump right now, he is pushing as hard as he possibly can to try to bring this economy down. All these talks about jobs and stuff, this is for after he resets the entire system. Now, he has to do it very soon, or the central bank, the deep state, they will win out. So there is a battle going on right now, and there's a race. We see that the deep state, the elite, well, they've just placed sanctions on Venezuela, the vice president, and we understand why they're doing this. They're calling him a drug kingpin, and we can see they're squeezing Venezuela because they've always wanted regime change in Venezuela. They want the oil because this is how the system functions. They need to go into countries, capture the country, have regime change, and place their natural resources on the dollar to keep the system alive. And what they do is they place sanctions and they squeeze these governments, and if they can, they try to have an uprising. And we've seen this in many areas. And we know that the elite, the central bankers, they're pushing for a war. We see that Jung Un's half-brother was assassinated in Malaysia. He was at the airport, and allegedly these two women walked up to him, stuck a needle into him, and then fled. They left in a taxi. And he started to feel dizzy, he started to feel ill, and he passed away. Now, he said several times, Kim Jong-nam, who is Kim Jong-un's half-brother, that he has no interest in leading his country. Personally, he said, I am against third-generation succession. I hope my younger brother will do his best for the sake of North Korea's prosperous lives. And everyone's saying, well, Kim Jong-un, he came out and he murdered his half-brother. The question is, why would he do it now? He knew where his brother has been. There were many, many chances to murder him. Why now? Now let's think about this. North Korea has been launching missiles. The United States has been provoking North Korea by bringing in additional military assets into South Korea, bringing in the THAAD missile system. And every time North Korea launches a missile, the United States says we're going to be placing sanctions, which they've done in the past. They know that Kim Jong-un, well, he's unstable. They know they can provoke him. By killing his brother, this might push him over the edge. And we can see that there is a video that was put out there of this missile launch. And what's very interesting about all of this is that the United States can launch a nuclear missile into the Pacific towards China, and it's not a provocation. But if North Korea launches a missile, well, that's a provocation. So the U.S., along with South Korea, they're going to be bringing in more military assets into the area, because South Korea is going to partake in the Key Resolve and Foul Eagle military exercises. And they're going to be bringing in F-22 stealth aircraft, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier for participation in the drills. And most likely, this equipment will be left in South Korea, because every time there's a drill like this, they seem to leave the equipment there for a future purpose. We see Trump right now is calling on Russia to return Crimea. Now, we see that Trump, he's listening to certain reports, believing certain information, placing sanctions on Iran, telling Russia to return Crimea, looking at North Korea, saying that this is unacceptable. So we can see the warmongers, they have their claws in Trump, and we can see they're pushing him in a certain direction. Now, remember, going back when there was the coup d'etat by the United States government central bankers where they spent $5 billion and Victoria Nuland headed this whole thing up, Crimea, with a vote of 97%, voted themselves away from Russia. Marine Le Pen in France said, no, Russia didn't steal Crimea. Crimea was always Russian. And they had a vote. But we see Trump out there. Well, he's out there saying, listen, Russia needs to return Crimea. And we can see that the war in Ukraine, it is building up. It's escalating right now. We see that 2 U.S. officials, they're out there saying that Russia has their spy ship off the U.S. East Coast. Now, they're in international waters. They're 70 miles away. But look how the corporate media gets crazy. Russia has a ship off the coast of the United States in international waters. The United States brought military assets right up to the border of Russia. We have warships sailing in the Black Sea right up to Russia. There's one ship from Russia, and the corporate media goes crazy that Russia is coming to get us. Look how they twist everything around. And we see right now that they're pushing this agenda to start a war. Now, Russia is sending more military police into Syria. It is the 2nd Battalion of Russian military police deployed to Syria, and they're trying to maintain certain areas, maintain law and order in Syria. The U.S. has admitted that they've used depleted uranium in Syria. More than 5,000 rounds of depleted uranium ammunition were used in 2 attacks on the Islamic State oil tankers in eastern Syria and in other areas of Syria. Now remember, depleted uranium, well, this allows the projectile to go through armored vehicles. It's a lot tougher. But the problem with this is that there's problems with the uranium bits and pieces that are laying around. They pose a significant risk of toxicity, birth defects, cancer when inhaled or ingested by humans or animals. And when these pieces are all over the ground and everything, they get into the water system. We've seen this in the Gulf War, 91, and the 2003 invasion in Iraq, where the Department of Defense used these depleted uranium rounds, and they saw a massive increase in cancer, birth defects, and everything else. But the real problem is Assad using chlorine gas. Well, isn't this a lot worse? Shouldn't this be banned? And many countries do ban these type of shells. But we can see right now there's always double standards when it comes to the deep state, the central bankers. Their purpose is to start war. The economy is coming down, and they're running out of time. Things are rapidly escalating, and they're trying to chip away at Trump. They're trying to push him in a certain direction. And we can see there is a battle going on. There's a race going on. And we can see as we move throughout this year, we're going to see everything heat up. And when this economy comes down, we've said it many times before, you need to be prepared for what is coming. Because this is going to be nothing like we've seen in 2008 or even the Great Depression. This is now global, where we have so much debt that the system cannot be sustained. The credit markets are going to freeze up, and it is going to be a complete disaster. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.